Prepare for launch in 3, 2, 1.
DJ Daniels.
Captain Sarah Shartemans holstered her gun, surveying the bodies to ensure they were all dead. After looking through the Horsford captain's pockets, she drew a small iron key. Satisfied, she nodded at the tallest of the remaining men from the inner circle. He followed her below deck, around a few corners and down a ladder. They came to a locked door. With a turn of the freshly acquired key, the door swung slowly open. Past the door was a hall that stretched to the right. It was lit by hanging lamps that swayed with the rocking of the ship. They walked down the short hallway, passing an empty cell with the barred door swung open. The second of 3 cells had an occupant. At the end of the hall was a small wooden desk pressed against the wall. The desk had a simple chair for a guard to sit in if needed. A barrel sat next to the desk, with a bucket on the floor in front of it. The seawater within rippled with the gently rocking ship. Sarah looked through a few of the drawers in the desk and drew a set of keys. She looked through them and picked a key, darker than the first she had used, then opened the cell door to the tune of creaking metal. She stepped past the bars, the other man with her staying just outside. The man in the cell was bound in tightly wrapped chains, keeping him from moving his arms or legs at all. His mouth, ears and eyes were covered in clean white leather patches, held by straps. Besides the mask, he was wearing linen wraps over his privates, and nothing else. His moderately built body was tinted by many days in the sunlight, and tangled black hair hung down to his shoulders, dripping wet, like the rest of his body. This was no doubt due to being splashed with water frequently to reduce any magical talent he retained, despite being at sea. Sarah crouched and went through the keys once more. She began the unlocking process, removing chains as she went. Lastly, she removed the leather covering his face. He blinked a few times, letting his dark, brown eyes adjust to the light, as he had been in the dark for a long time. His eyes stopped on Sarah, assessing her danger level. He cleared his throat before speaking. "To whom do I owe the pleasure?" His voice was fluid and professional. A corner of her mouth twitched, wanting to smile. She resisted. Remaining crouched allowed her to observe the specimen in detail. With a slight upward tilt of her black captain's hat, she looked him over. She noted a lack of facial hair, not even stubble despite prolonged captivity. "Oh, I have not changed that much. Have I?" He grinned at her, tipping his head down slightly and to the side. "I am simply cautious. It is part of my line of work, after all. Also, it would be impolite to converse without a proper introduction." Giving in, she smiled. "Captain Sarah Shartemans." She reached out a hand. He took the hand. "Maestro Clarkson Powett." Sarah pulled him to his feet, giving him a moment to balance before releasing her grip. "You're a captain now." Clark nodded approvingly. "You have been a busy young lady. As have you, old man. You went from a teacher to one of the biggest bounties in the kingdom. What did you do? Another story for another time. So, this is the big haul you were after?" Her first mate was now leaning on the metal frame to the cell door, arms crossed. He had his black hair tied in a knot at the back of his head. His tanned face was accented with a ring of black hair surrounding his mouth. His pale blue eyes watched Clark with disinterest. "Yes," she said. "This man is invaluable." She gestured a hand toward him. "He can get us into the largest underwater safe this side of Legion territory." He stood up straight, and his eyebrows twitched skyward. "That's impossible. It's at the bottom of the pit. There's only one way in, and that's through half the soldiers in the Legion." He looked back and forth between Sarah and Clark. "That's the king's gold you're talking about. You want to rob the king?" "Yes," she replied simply.
DJ Daniels.